Hello, everyone. I'm the discount Father Eric, being neither actually hairless on the top of my head nor being ordained by the Roman Catholic Church, but I am here to facilitate the Sunday open mic night. So I think Father will be dropping in at various points. Mark, yes, it's here. Only 1 minute late, which shows you that I'm not as German Catholic as Father Eric is, because it's 1 minute late. Yeah, anyway, I think Father's going to be here at some point. I believe he's been on some sort of journey and asked me to start this up for him. So please feel free to believe that I cut my hair just to make look like a knockoff Father Eric. That's I even like, it's like kind of wore the same kind of shirt, just no collar. It's like it really is. It's like as close to Father Eric as I'm gonna get. Maybe I should have grown out my beard more for this, but he didn't give me like a lot of heads up. So there you go. But yeah, at any rate, I think the StreamYard link, I hope the StreamYard link is working. This is a little bit of a mad dash to get this all up here. It's where the bald awesomeness. Look, Mark, you and Father were just making me feel bad. And so, I just had to cut it off. And I'm sure I'm going to get there before long, any rate. So, I'm not that worried. It's been a busy week over here. I've been kind of running around. So it'll be nice to. What's the topic? I'm happy to join you if need. There's a lot of topics we could talk about. Man, I don't know. The fun thing about the open mic night is it's for other, what anyone wants to talk about. I've got my kind of usual things that I go to. I did go to an interesting, it's like a poetry writing exercise that my friend, some group of his, of people that he knew they were doing. So it was the dean of a little college around here. In the liberal arts school, and he hopped over and gave this it was like a how to write poetry. I don't know. I showed up in the middle of it, which is always interesting to show up in the middle of something like that. And they were doing some sort of investigation. I think hello, Mark.
Hello.
That's quite the illustration behind you. Is that a cell undergoing division or something, or scrambled up DNA behind you? Is it evil?
It's a spider eating a person.
Oh, because of your live stream on fear.
Oh, you are paying attention. Yes, indeed. That was we decided on.
Dude, Mark, in the fear category, spiders way up top for me. Just so you know, snakes,
me too.
Not a problem. Spiders, dude, no. It's too many eyes. It's too many legs, and the fangs are inordinately large.
Oh, snakes are the opposite. So everyone got a kick out of it because I was on Discord and I was talking about, there's a snake in the house. And then the snake had apparently escaped the back room, which I still haven't figured out quite yet. But I was on Discord and I went into the living room and snake scared me. I was like, snake. I was like, ah. Sure, they were all plenty pleasant, but snakes have too few legs. Spiders have too many legs. They're on the right either way, right? They're on the spectrum.
I get it. No, that makes perfect sense. And spiders have all the wrong kind of hair, and snakes have no hair. They're
yes. Well, and so the interesting thing to me, Ted, maybe you have a comment on this because we were noodling over this a while back. When you read when you read Genesis, or if you read Genesis, I haven't read Genesis. It's a lovely story. It's not a serpent that feeds Eve the apple. Whatever feeds Eve the apple loses its legs as the result of. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe it was a spider. That explains everything.
Well, okay. So, Mark, it's really interesting that you say that because I just started through my read through the Lord of the Rings. And there's all this. First of all, I wish I had brought the fellowship with me because there's this quote from it where I was like, if you take one sentence out where Bilbo's talking about the ring, I was like, dude, he's just talking about a smartphone. Every single thing in here is a smartphone. He's like, it's growing on me. I feel like I can't, it's I feel like I can't leave it alone. Sometimes it seems like it's an eye looking at me. it's like all this stuff was like, dude, he's just talking about anyway. But in the Silmarillion, right? Because in the Silmarillion, you've got Valinor, and you have the two trees that give light to the world. It's like, okay, right, yes, got it. It's not a snake that drives the trees from the world, because there's, it's like, in some ways, like being driven from the trees and the trees being taken away, it's sort of the same thing. But there, it's a spider. It's Ungoliant. It's the world spider that comes out and like, dude, Tolkien gets how scary spiders are. Like if you read the full Tolkien corpus, like Ungoliant is, ugh. It's his, spiders are his picture, I think, of that which just seeks to bring everything inside of itself destructively. Like in his mind, like that's what a spider is. It's the thing that'll just like, right? Because think about what a spider does.
You have too many eyes.
Also, yes, they have too many eyes. But their eyes like, right? There's eyes and then there's eyes, right? Because there's eyes that let you connect, but spider eyes are not for connecting. Spider eyes are for consuming, and then they either paralyze you or wrap you up in something so that you can't do anything anymore.
Right? They draw you in.
They draw you in, and then
right,
and then they dissolve you from the inside out.
Then they dissolve you from the inside out. Yeah,
it's like, yeah, and then they just suck you into their abdomen. It's like, yeah, like praise be to God that they have an open circulatory system and book lungs, and that we don't have to deal with any spiders bigger than this, because physics are on our side with spiders.
Physics have protected us from spiders. Science wins again, Ted. Science wins again.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, the creator of the universe knew what he was doing when he's like, all those freaky arthropods, all open circulatory systems, so that you can't get big. The column pressure across an organism like that is going to prevent them from getting very large. And also, well, spiders are better, but insects, the other reason insects don't get huge, I don't know if you know this, Mark, but their respiratory system is just a diffusion. Like they have holes in the side of them, and like they're not using lungs. They've just got holes.
They don't breathe?
They do breathe, but they don't have lungs. They don't have like a...
So they don't breathe. No. Breath is the in and out. Like that's the spirit. They don't have spirit.
Okay. So this is actually a really interesting thing. So they do the in and out, but they don't have a special structure for it. They just have holes, and they have hemolymph, which is bug blood, and they
have to move. They have to move to take in air.
Yes.
So they're not doing the in and out. They're moving through the world as a way of sustenance. It's fundamentally parasitic.
You think this is why we think bugs are so freaky?
That's why bugs are freaky. Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, I don't even remember whether this was in some where was this? I know. Yes, it was the summer that I'm going to get Chad on here really quick. Chad will like this story too. Maybe he won't. I don't know how Chad feels about bugs. Hey, Chad.
Hey.
So, this one summer I was working with my brother worked for this inner city youth development thing up in the Northeast, and I took the kids to this butterfly sanctuary, and they had it's really cool. You go and they've got all the butterflies flying around in this rainforest thing. And then they've got this other room with all these little terrariums of stuff. It's like, here's a box turtle, here's a snake, and then there's this one that had one of the largest. You know what leaf insects are? They're like walking sticks, but instead of trying to look like sticks, they look like leaves. And they're kind of thick. I don't know how else to describe it. And so there's this one terrarium that's like this big, maybe like a foot by 2 feet by 3 feet, not that big. And it's the biggest species in the world. The biggest ones are like this big, like 8 inch, like bigger than your hand. And the thing is just chock full of them. I mean, on the walls, on the ground, all over. And they're all just pulsing together, almost rhythmically. Dude, it gave me the willies so hard. There's just too many of them, and they're all moving just enough, but not enough. It was, yeah. I don't know that I feel like you could take that one and just dissect it in terms of why is that horrifying to me? Mark, are you looking at what are those called? Leaf bugs?
No, I didn't bring up leaf bugs.
Well, Chad, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just I saw you in here. I want to say nice haircut and
Thanks. Yeah.
see how
Yeah.
you're doing. Yeah, the only bugs that really kind of give me the creeps are like centipedes and bugs that sting, and then
Mm.
along with bugs that sting, I haven't seen them around here. But when I was a kid, they used to have these bugs in California. We I don't know what they were technically called, but we would call them potato bugs. And they
Mhm.
have like they're crawling bugs. I don't know if they fly, but they have a stinger on them, and they're just nasty. Uh, I don't know the technical term of them, but I haven't seen them in the Midwest. Thank God.
There is a, it's funny. There's something particular about stinging bugs. I'm looking up this word. I think I'm going to get it in here in a second with the help of Google.
So,
No,
so
that's
how does
not
it
it.
work, Dad? I mean, if the bugs, I mean, some bugs do stay stationary for a time. If there's no wind, do they suffocate? Because we can stay
No,
stationary and
no,
breathe.
no, 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 no. No, it's not like that. So they do like they can like contract their abdomen like this. So they don't have a diaphragm. They're just like contract because they're not. I don't know if any bugs have a completely hard exoskeleton. And so
Right.
if you think about it, it's not like blowing like it's like a sponge, right? If you squeeze a sponge, it like pushes everything out everywhere, and then you let go and it like sucks everything
Yeah.
from everywhere. So they've just got a bunch of
Right.
holes in them. So one
I
of the things,
gotcha.
and so what that means is that it's really hard for like oxygen to get a long way into their body because they're really
Right.
dealing with diffusion. They don't have the kind of separation that like that mammals do or reptiles or fish or anything where it's like, hey, you've got this one particular oxygen exchange area, so you can take the least oxygenated
Specialized.
blood,
They don't have
right?
a specialized area for oxygen exchange like we do, and a specialized system. And so
Yeah,
that means they need more movement to breathe,
they
basically,
need
whereas we need much
well,
less.
and then what also happens is that they just max out in terms of size because you're dealing with this diffusion. You can't move it actively across large areas of body, right?
Right.
So because they don't have blood vessels. And so
Right.
because we have blood vessels, we're isolating our oxygen carrying fluid in
Yep.
areas, and we can keep the fresh blood from the exhausted blood, the oxygenated from the less oxygenated blood separate from each other. Then you just max out at like how much can you get. The further into the bug you get, the less oxygen there is. And so then
Right.
they just eventually get big enough where the interior can't oxygenate, and then you'd have tissue necrosis, which
Right.
doesn't
Because we
work
used to have giant dragonflies, but we had a much
when
higher amount of oxygen in the atmosphere.
bingo.
And
That's
people
exactly right.
don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Insects were big when oxygen was high in the atmosphere. And actually, this is one of the things that really pisses me off. Like as a junior paleontologist, when I was a boy, like I wasn't double digits, I knew that there was much more CO2 in the atmosphere. Like I think it's 100 times more CO2 in the atmosphere, and the temperatures weren't that much higher. Which is why when
Oh,
they do the climate stuff, I'm like, do you? I know you people are punking us. Like, did you never look at the fossil record far enough back?
are
Because
you talking?
the
You're talking about
geologists have known this for
like the
years.
what do they call it? The carbonaceous period, when it was just like when they're like, yeah, there's all this carbon dioxide and all this oxygen in the atmosphere, and then yeah,
At the same time, and it wasn't 60,000 degrees like we would predict now. Because I've run it in their models. I'm like, all
yeah,
right, well, and this is one of those little things that nobody knows. All geologists, like 80% of geologists, were climate science is bullshit from day one. Because geologists and paleontologists who actually look at the fossil record know
yeah.
exactly how much carbon dioxide was in the atmosphere for exactly how long, and they know what the temperature was, so they know these guys are full of it. Like they already
That's
know, and
interesting.
they knew that. I knew that when I was a kid. I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
like what knowledge did we lose exactly that these people are being alarmist about a little bit of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? This makes no sense.
yeah.
I just saw a thing that I don't know if it's real or whatever, but guy was talking about a methane increase event, something like there's going to be a like an ice age coming soon or whatever due to a rise in methane. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Well, the
Oh,
original climate guy, one of the founders of Greenpeace, was the original scientist in the late 60s, 70s, something like that. I think it was the 70s, who basically said, "Oh, we're going to have global cooling due to sulfur." And he to be fair, got everybody to remove sulfur out of automotive fuel. Which was ultimately a good thing, just not for the reasons he said, it's like the irony, right? Like removing sulfur was great, but it had nothing to do with the climate. But also, sulfur cools the climate. So actually, him doing that caused the opposite, not really, but like it's just one of these things that's like you think you know about the world and you have no idea and you're just messing it up.
Yeah. Well, look, I just like it. All that stuff is so difficult to predict. I mean, like it.
Right.
You're talking about the
impossible to predict. They're multivariate equations. Science does not do well on multivariate equations.
And they're all recursive. And then they're all recursive, which is really problematic. And so
reciprocating, right?
Yes.
Reciprocal.
Yes. Yeah. I want to so this is Charlotte's Web is a great spider story, right? So Mark and Chad, you both know Charlotte's Web, the story?
Yes.
Chad?
Yeah.
Okay. I shouldn't have pushed you on that. If you're embarrassed about not having read it, then I shouldn't.
I haven't read it.
This actually brings up a really interesting point. So I had one of my friends in college. We're talking about probably Interstellar came out, and so we're talking about black holes. And he was telling me that like in his mind, black holes are, to go back to this notion of fear, Mark. Black holes are like let's say the natural quintessence of evil. Right. And in his mind, they're just like they just destroy everything and they suck everything into them. And I was like, yeah, except that you also look at black holes and they're what apparently maintain galactic structures. Like they're the reason that, we have star formation because interstellar gas clouds are held together because of them and on and on and on and on.
So wait a minute, Ted. Are you saying that they are not only the limits of physics, but also they define the limits of the structure of the universe itself? Weird.
Something like that.
No, just evil.
What did you say, Chad?
I said, no, they're just evil.
They're just evil. Okay, so this brings up a hypothesis I have, right? So you've got so with the spiders, you've got like Ungoliant, the world spider, who tries to eat everything good in the world and is blotted out with her vast, obese weight. And then you've got Charlotte from Charlotte's Web and, the actual good things that spiders do. And I have this notion that pretty much everything on this level of things, when we look around and we look at things, there's this valence in which you can almost everything. You can, let's say, when you move it up to the world of an image, either could be a positive thing or a negative thing. And I'm not I haven't pushed that very far, but I find that to be fascinating. And you can pick up great poets and they'll take the same thing and it'll be really negative, and then somewhere else it'll be really positive. Chad, what you got something on that?
Yeah. So have you read or listened to any of Mark Twain's posthumous or posthumously released material?
No.
There's a book that he was writing called Letters from the Earth.
Okay.
And, I think you might get a kick out. It's Letters from the Earth, and then there's another one called The Diaries or Excerpts from the Diaries of Adam and Eve. Those are both fascinating and hilarious.
Letters from the Earth?
Yep, Letters from the Earth. That one, I don't think he actually finished it. Because to me, the way it ended didn't seem like he got to finishing it. But he talks about flies in there, and like flies are the most evil thing. And
nice.
It's real. I mean, that's actually some of the only stuff by him I ever read, or I never read it. I listened to audio versions. There's a bunch of free versions of them right on YouTube. But the Adam and Eve excerpts from Adam and Eve's diaries, fascinating, hilarious. So the length of Eve's is about 45 minutes, and then Adam's is only about 25 minutes, which there's
sounds about right.
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting because like I don't know. I think he kind of gets at things. I don't know exactly what he's getting at, but there's a reason why he didn't want those things released while he was alive. So,
Well, so this is like a pretty serious. I'll give you like a pretty serious version of this, which is just, but it's worth pondering. So, I think it was the Tin Boom sisters. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Betsy and Corey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
both
so
of which saints, I think, and actually, I think Betsy and the father would have been saints, considered saints, I think, if they were Catholic.
So everything that I've heard about them lines up with that, Chad. And there's a story about how they're in a prison camp. They're in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany under the Nazis. I don't know.
Before you go further, can I say something? Because this is a point that I've been trying to make time and time again about how kind of reductionist people will talk about things like evil and things, and it's very cut and dry. Thing is only evil, or a thing is only good, and no good can come out of evil. And when I think the Corey Ten Boom story, along with her family's story, is a complete shattering of that frame, because some of the most beautiful things happened because of some of the most horrific things happened.
Yeah.
And, like the fact that I know you're going to talk about the fleas, but
yeah, you know the story.
Yeah. So, but the fact that happened, and they were able to have, whatever nights it was that they would have nights of worship. So it would be, Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, Jews, and atheists all worshiping under the same roof.
Yeah.
All right, no, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Chad, I'm glad you know the story. For anyone who doesn't, and you might be able to correct some of the details. So I'm going to give it in really rough outlines, because this is what I have. Basically, the barracks that they're in, they're just like, their beds are infested with fleas. Like, it's bad. And all of the Tin Boom sisters are, they're telling the other women, they're like, be thankful for the fleas. Like, I don't know why, but be thankful for the fleas. And so Chad, you were bringing up their ability to gather together there and be left alone. But like, I've also heard that the guards were like really mistreating the women in other barracks, and in the ways that, let's say, men who have women under their power would do. But they never came in and messed with the women in the house with fleas.
Right.
So, what's evil? What's bad? It's like, man, it's a complicated thing. And so, Chad, I like this, and like, this is a point that I also bring up over and over and over, and like, is part of the reason I think Job is such a great story, right?
Well,
and
yeah,
because it's like, well, when do you know, right? And we always rush to make this judgment of like, I'm uncomfortable, so it's bad, or it hurt me, so it's bad, or I can't see where the good is coming from this, so it's bad, or whatever. And so I'm well and truly into like I believe that you can't look. I was just thinking about this, right? With my family, right? And so we've gotten this far, and we've got these children. I'm in this marriage, and there's all sorts of things that could totally change that story, right? Like I could die tomorrow. I could die, whatever. And you said, okay, well now the story is a tragedy. Like, it was this beautiful story, and now it's a tragedy. But the thing that finally clicked with me is like, the appropriate things for me to do, and for my wife to do, and for our children to do are the same, regardless of whether we get another 40 years of marriage or another day.
Right. Right.
And so it finally clicked with me, that because the way that I kept saying it sounded like, well, you don't know, so who knows how to act? It's kind of all fine, because like, really, you have no idea how it's going to turn out. And then it finally hit me. I was like, no, like, when we say like it's the right thing to do, one of the things that we mean is it's the thing that works. It's the appropriate thing, regardless of what what happens in the future. And like, I think that might be that is a way of defining wisdom. Like that's not the only way to define wisdom, but that a way of defining wisdom is saying it was the right thing to do regardless of what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to reframe that action badly is maybe a way of saying it.
That's why I like principles, because if you're able to follow principles regardless of outcomes, I think, well, it's a matter of what principles, So, I know that Mark and I have talked about this. The idea of principles as such is not sufficient, but which principles are we talking about here? But the idea that the idea about things being good or bad, I think some of that stuff is yes. Was it bad? Yes. Was it good? Yes. It's like it's above our pay scale in a lot of ways, and like, well, it's like when I hear people say something like they like, well, fearmonger people into something because they're gonna die. It's like, yeah, like everybody else, and like, so like the one thing from the film, Don't Look Up, that I thought was the best aspect and probably the only good aspect of the film. So the very end of the film was breathtaking, I thought, with the prayer scene. But the most poignant piece of the whole film was when they're going around freaking out and they're telling people, everybody, we're gonna die. It's like, yeah, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If you watch some of those scenes, it's like, if you look at it from, say, I don't think that I think that whoever made that film was trying to say something very important in those scenes. It's like, you're gonna die all the time.
They were struggling with a bunch of stuff they clearly didn't understand, and the film sort of reflects that. It's very very postmodern. Oh, there he is. Look at that.
Yeah. Hey,
Father.
Greetings from Wyoming.
Ooh.
Amazing.
Ooh, we're in Wyoming. Okay.
Gillette. They haven't shaved me yet, though.
Well, Eric, you really go in for like a diversity of geography. You're like, should I be in the high plains that are sort of in the Midwest, or should I be in the high plains that are sort of a little bit further west from the Midwest?
I am. My dad and I are on a excursion to move our brother-in-law from Las Vegas to Fargo. So
nice.
Today was day one of the 4-day trip.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
From city to God's country. Beautiful.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, like, I'm used to small towns. I'm used to rural areas and all of that. But Southwest North Dakota, Western South Dakota, and Wyoming are a different level of rural than I am accustomed to.
Yeah, they
100%.
are.
100%. There's very little going on out here.
Wow.
Whole lot of
Great
nothing.
to see you guys. I gotta go spend time. I'm gonna go spend time with my wife, but it's great to see you. I wish I could talk more, but great discussion. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for dropping in, Chad.
Yep. Later.
Yeah. So, Father, what was it? A week ago? 2 weeks ago? Jiminy. Wow, that was a week ago, I think. I helped drive my sister up to her school up in, it was like 8 hours north of here. And we were going through Illinois. And the thing about Illinois that shocked me was the sense of volume, right? Like here in Arkansas, especially in the summer, it just like, there's just this like dome of blue. It's like, you just feel like there's like a bowl upside down over you. And I don't know if it's Illinois all the time or what, but like, there's like windmills out for forever. And then there's these clouds, and it felt like I had been shrunk down to like this small, and I was at the bottom of a huge lake. Like just like the sense of like, there's just air. There's just air and like more air, and like you're looking through it. It was that. And then we got these windmills turning the right way, and then they're matching the parallax effect of the trees. They're like in the mid distance, and it looked like they're like rolling along at the same speed as the car through the landscape. It was so trippy. I could not look at it. I was going to drive off the road.
Yeah, we call that big sky country.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's real. I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were just like scraping the bottom of the barrel for something to hold up about that part of the world, but it's real, I guess.
Yeah. It's really
Mm.
shocking when you get out there, especially if you get the top down, and yeah, it's fantastic because there's like it's not even sky. It's something else. It's because there's so much of it. It's like, it can't be sky. I have sky where I'm at. It's the same sky. It's not the same sky. It's not. It's like, I don't know what's going on here. It's kind of weird.
That's amazing. Wow. No, that was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. I was like, what did I do last week? Oh my goodness. No, last week we went to a homesteading expo in Missouri. That was awesome.
Homesteading expo.
That is the most dead thing you've said all day.
Mark, the notion of an expo and homesteading go together like oil and water. Like, it's really fun.
Exactly. I was just like, nah, Ted's making stuff up again. He's hitting the ganja or something. He's
it's super real. And yeah, it was pretty wild. It was in Marshfield, Missouri, which I didn't realize is where Edwin Hubble, the astrophysicist, is from. He's from nowhere, Missouri. They've got like a model of the Hubble Space Telescope there. It was like,
oh, cool.
That was weird. And yeah, it was wild. Like, it is a homesteading. The like people who come to homesteading events from the online space. That is a really interesting crew. You've got everything from like the holiness people to like the guy who's wearing a kilt and open carrying to the like total hippie. It's just like the entire spectrum, but they're all there because like they want to see someone do like, you know, like a live hog butchering demo and learn about livestock guardian dogs and how to sneak around the IRS on your homestead. So
yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was a pretty cool thing. It's really funny to see like the commercial products that people also are like they're selling to the homesteading group. There were some, I'll be honest, I was drooling over some of the hand crank grain mills.
That doesn't sound very sanitary.
I mean, I wasn't literally drooling over them, Father, but just next to.
Your eyes went out like that and your tongue.
Yep. Oh, yeah. That beautiful cherry red with that cast iron flywheel on it. Yeah. So it was fun. There was some really cool. There's a mushroom guy there that had an awesome display of like forest collected fungi. And you want to talk about something that is just totally wild. Pay attention to mushrooms. Like the bracket fungi, you look at the underside of them and the patterns going on. Oh my goodness. Just, yeah. They're cool.
That's how trees communicate, man. Dun,
yeah.
Dun, dun.
Mark,
like, wait, what?
No, it wasn't you. I was talking with a friend of mine about the science behind plants' roots moving towards water. And he was like, apparently no one understands how they make it towards, like, they'll do stuff like,
yeah,
they'll like play the sound of running water over here, and then they'll have still water here, and it'll just like go to the still water, or they'll like put it in a PVC pipe, and it'll still like hit the side of the PVC pipe that's towards the damp water. It's like,
right. No, they haven't figured that out. Yeah, the last I checked, they had no clue.
I just love
they
it.
Actually don't. They don't understand how plants seek sunlight either. Like, and they know this because when they take them up in space, weird things happen, and they're like, this doesn't fit any theories. Why aren't the plants figuring this out? I don't know. Why indeed? You know? Why indeed?
What were the plants doing in space?
They just don't behave correctly because of the lack of gravity. And if you try to simulate gravity on them and stuff, like, none of the theories of how plants grow were actually correct. And so when they put them in space, they didn't behave the way anybody expected. So they don't have theories of how this stuff works. Like, everybody thinks we know how plants work, but actually we have no idea. Like, we only discovered about the mushrooms and the tree communication recently. Like, that's not 20 years old.
Yeah. It's super, and there's that, and then just like the level of interaction going on there. I think for some plants, there's two kinds of basically root interacting fungi, and certain kinds, they're actually increasing the surface area of the roots for nutrient and water uptake by like tenfold. Like the fungi have 10 times the surface area of the plant's roots.
That we know of.
And the plants are, feeding them carbohydrates to keep them alive, and they're pulling water and minerals and stuff that they're pulling from the soil into the plant. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, Chesterton was making this point back in the 1920s, where he was like, the closer the stuff is to us, the less that we like understand it, in the sense of that sort of like analytical say, mechanical explanations for things. It's like sleep. Why do we sleep? Right? State of the art research is because we get tired. Seriously, like that's actually like
the best they can do.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone knows the reason is we need to practice dying. But at any rate,
No, science will get it. Science will get it. Remember, I mentioned this as frequently as I can, just to prove the absurdity of science. You know, they only recently discovered that in fact they can measure the fact that if you fall out of a relationship, your heart is damaged. And if you get into and then it took them another while to figure out if you get into a relationship, it actually physically repairs your heart. And I'm like, guys, literally everybody already knew. And by everybody, I mean everybody since the dawn of time. We have songs, we have books, we have poems, we have parables. Like, we already knew this. Like, thanks for the update, science, Captain Obvious. Like, really? and it's just so silly. It's like, what are you guys doing with your science? I don't get it.
Yeah, oh my goodness. That just immediately makes me think of St. Margaret of Scotland dying of a broken heart. You know.
Oh, yeah, dude. I went through that not too long ago. I was like, oh, this is definitely real. And I'm right on the edge. It's like, oh, okay. That's fair enough.
So, Andrew, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say it just sounds like, you could hear all those songs, but those scientists were probably thinking like, oh, but that's emotions, has nothing to do with physical hearts,
Right. Well, and here's interesting. I figured this out when I was young. So when I was fairly young, my uncle, my father, a few other people were making comments about when they were kids and how often Christmas had snow. And other people were saying, no, that's just sample bias. That's just this, that, and the other thing. None of those people went back and looked at the records because it turns out they were right. Their memories were actually correct. It was more often to snow when they were little than it had been since they had passed some certain age. And I was just like, this is the problem with science. It makes a bunch of presumptions and says, well, we know about this bias and we've heard this, and science would tell us somehow, because it's a magical creature. I don't know if you knew that would just tell us things. And therefore, since it hasn't told us, it must not be true, because people always want science to be the teller of the truth rather than the thing that tells you what's wrong, which the entire scientific method only tells you things that are wrong. It doesn't actually tell you things that are right. It just infers that the thing that hasn't been proven wrong yet is the most correct. And that's a theory. And all the other competing ideas are just hypotheses or something, right? That's how it's supposed to work.
That's like something that should not be underemphasized, is that anytime you read something like theory was proven, it's like, unless you're talking about math, like that's technically incorrect. It is technically incorrect to ever say that a scientific theory has been proven. Now, you might have like what they call like a 6 sigma confidence on it, right? That it's like a 1 in a million chance based on the data we have that the null hypothesis is generating this data. But like the way that science is done means that you can't prove anything positively. Right. You can prove things negatively, but you can't prove things positively.
Exactly. And
this is actually, Dr. Toma is the one who brought this up to me, and he connects this with the old Aristotelian and Thomistic notion of the immateriality of the intellect, which is like, if we're going to know true things about the world, there has to be something going on that's not merely material, because we're not encountering things to know in that way in the world. One of the classic examples is of a triangle. He's like, you cannot, by science, prove that a triangle has a certain interior angle of 180 degrees. Because and he goes into like why that is. It's like, well, you could measure it, but even if it was technically a perfect triangle, the bottom limits of physics would never let you round out all the zeros, right?
Exactly.
It will be, 180.00000. That's how far we got. And then you get down in the quantum realm and then we're just toast. Like, you actually can't measure that, but you can know 180 degrees is the interior angle of a triangle. He's like, so what's weird is he then takes that and says, this is how we can know that something is going on in your head that's not just embedded in material reality. Something else is going on based on the mere fact that you can know with real certainty that the triangle has 180 degrees of interior angle. To me, that's fascinating. It's like that stuff is,
Yeah.
again, so basic. A lot of this stuff is really close to us. That's what I was bringing up about that Chesterton quote. It's like a lot of this, if you look way out there, hey, like we know this about, these particular forms of the way reality manifests, and you start to bring it in. And again, this is Thomas' point, like you can't know the wavelength of red light until you can recognize red light. Like the knowledge of red light precedes any scientific understanding about red light.
Exactly.
Like,
Well, that's the fundamental problem, is that detail matters. And as you get further out in detail, you can know more because you need less precision. But science is about precision and accuracy. And so it increases the detail. And then ironically, it meets limits of what you can know because, right? Because, so for example, and this is a famous thing in physics, there is nothing preventing you from walking through a 3-foot steel wall and coming out on the other side in physics. Nothing at all, except mere statistics. In other words, according to all we know about physics, even at the quantum layer, or especially at the quantum layer, because actually the statistics tilt in your favor at that point, which is really weird. You can definitely walk through a wall if you try hard enough. And it doesn't matter what the wall's made of. It makes no difference at all, unless it's an energy field of some kind that we haven't been able to produce in a large enough quantity to know if it's practical to scale up.
I've got something to level at you, Mark. I don't think physics would allow you to walk through a neutron star, but I'm not certain about that because I think that's a collapsed atomic. Because I think that at that point, well, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you on that one.
You don't know anything about neutron stars.
That's the problem.
Experience of them.
We know nothing about them, right? It's all math theory. But like at a certain point, like this is the problem with black holes, because we talked about that earlier, right? The problem with black holes is that actually all the math collapses for real. It fails. It's like the Big Bang. All you can get so close to the Big Bang, and I forget how many picoseconds, right? And then math fails. They admit this. This isn't hidden. It's not like you go look and you'll find out, oh yeah, the math fails. So what that means is that the boundary between matter and energy changes. We don't actually know where that boundary is. We kind of know, again, we know roughly that it exists. We know roughly what the number is, but we have no practical experience of it, right? We can't. So it might be that a neutron star becomes an energy field. And yes, for energy fields, according to physics, but again, we still don't know, right? You can't get through an energy field because the energy would be destroyed. That's why a common go-to for Gnostic thinkers when they reach the end of materialism is, oh, no, we're pure energy. And therefore that solves all the problems of materialism. It's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's something really interesting there. And hold on, it's going to take me just a half a second. Yes. Okay. So one of the things that's interesting is you get these weird things with like the way people talk about black holes, like event horizon and singularity, right? And like by the time they get to common parlance, people take them as a thing, as though the event horizon is a thing, like a material object, and the singularity is a material object.
Or a position.
They're not. The event horizon is the space that we know nothing out across. Like once you get to what you're saying is you can't see anything past that. It's not a thing. Likewise, the singularity is not a thing. It's what happens to the math when you put the numbers in for a black hole. Like we don't know anything about what a singularity is. It's just
the math collapses. That's what a singularity is. It's the actual collapse of mathematical theory.
Yeah.
Math fails to work at the statement of the singularity is the statement that math fails to work. And the singularity comes up when you try to get to the essence of the Big Bang. So when you go past some number of picoseconds of the Big Bang, you also reach the singularity. It came from that first and it went to black holes second. And it's the same problem. You just reach the limits of the math.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the infinite creates the finite.
Exactly.
Almost as if, Father Eric.
Yes,
almost as if.
So Mark, I wanted to take something else. You're talking about this, right? You're looking at something like the Big Bang, and you're trying to get in as close as you can, but you can't ever get there, right? You can get there's this sort of mathematical Zeno's paradox there.
It's Zeno's paradox.
As you're moving. And so what's interesting is, and Father Eric, you probably would be able to help me refine this. It strikes me that this notion of like substances changing, right, in sort of the Aristotelian view of the world, which is that like substances do change. Like when I eat something, right, the substance of the salad that I had, like, is taken up into TED, into my substance. But you can't figure out where that happened. There's no, it
doesn't happen in one place either.
It doesn't happen in one place or at one time. But like, that's all change.
Or through one process.
All change is like that, in that you can keep, there's a sort of like
All material change. Spirit can change instantly. Doesn't have parts.
Thank you. That's a great, this is the kind of refinement that I'm after here. Right. So, well, and honestly, like, you get this, I'll just throw this grenade in there too. Like, it's the same thing with the whole notion of abortion too, right? We're trying to, it's the same thing as trying to define the start, like,
right.
The start of life is the same problem as the start of the universe. And you're like, well, we've got this sort of continuous gradient of change from a moment that we were definitely before. There's definitely a time before it. And then it's happening.
But materiality requires discrete processes. And we are not discrete processes. So all things on the material register are divisible into distinct, discrete divisions. But, and this is why the knowledge engine model that we came up with, that I use all the time, has part of your brain processes discrete things. Part of your brain processes using continuous things. And there's different math for this too, interestingly. Like, we actually have different math, and you can use the same, you can plug in the same values in that math and you get slightly different answers. And there's a whole art to picking whether you want to use continuous equations or discrete equations. And that's what's so interesting. And I did want to address Corey. But by the way, your talk with Corey was great. I left you some comments. I don't know if you saw.
On Karen's channel? Oh, awesome.
No, wherever you did. I thought it was your channel that you talked
on my channel, which I've done a couple on my channel. Yeah. Anyway,
we did
Karen's on the space, on the ransom trilogy.
I haven't seen that one yet.
I love talking to Corey. Corey's
just
awesome.
as real as consciousness. Consider this, because I've thought about this a lot for years. Consciousness is just the scientific version of soul, but they don't want to say soul, so they came up with a new word, because they have the equal ability to define it as they have to define any other sort of thing like soul. It really is a total black box for them. It was one of the things that came up or didn't come up in Thunder Bay that Catherine was a little upset about. Like, nobody defined it. And they didn't, because then the problem, once you do that, you open the box that psychologists went in 2 years ago, which is, well, there's consciousness, which is sort of the rational side. What about unconscious? Well, they had to invent the unconscious to explain all the irrational behavior humans do. That's why in psychology, you have the conscious and the unconscious, the conscious and the subconscious and unconscious are the same thing. So that's what happens when you run into the boundaries of these things. And I think that Zeno's paradox is specifically designed to show you the limits of your material interaction in the world.
Look, this is, I listened to one or two of Paul Vanderklay's podcasts on Jordan Peterson dealing, like, he was like pulling Jordan Peterson's, like, the College of Psychologists and his ex's seminars together, which were pretty fun. Yeah, because the soul is the formal cause, at least in a person. Like, the human soul is the formal cause of the person, and science does not examine formal causes. Like, just so he's like, and this whole thing about how psychologists are the priests of the modern world, like of the modern Western world, which is like, yes, first of all, absolutely, that's dead on. But I'm over here banging my head against the wall. I'm like, psychologist. It's like the psyche. Psyche is the Greek word for soul. Like, psyche, isn't it? It's like, yeah. No wonder you run into overlapping domains here. It's like,
they don't see it. It's just like, the DEI guys. You realize that the DEI people actually said DIE until Peterson kept pointing it out to them. No, really, because you can't avoid it. Like, at some point, the ethos of evil makes itself known in an unambiguous way, and then we kind of fail to notice these things.
I literally had two people very close in my life who I've known for years and years and years in the same week, completely independently, come up to me and be like, it just occurred to me that like all these corporations in our country are being run by demons. And they mentioned specifically, and they don't listen to Jonathan Pageau, so they don't have the whole like
No.
A demon's being manifest in this body and all this. They're like, yeah, I just realized that like no person is in the driver's seat of corporations. And like,
well, that's where egregores come from. Like if you watch, like you should see what I've been seeing, like on Clubhouse and stuff. If you watch, they're all converging on the same thing. Like they really are all converging on the same thing. And they're running head first for Jonathan Pageau and sort of the orthodox ethos of how the world actually works, right? Like they're running right into it. It's really scary. But we don't notice these things. I mean, the big theme for me, actually, embarrassingly enough, this week was I just sort of realized. So when I first saw Vervaeke, he's got that icon, the man above the fog or whatever it's called there. With it's one guy. He's on a mountain. He's above the clouds.
The romance painting, the romantic painter. Yeah, where he's like,
and it's a romantic painting, right? Like, didn't passed right by me, right? Until like a year and a half ago when I went, oh, the answer was there all along. He's an individualist who wants to be alone in the world and above everybody else. It's right in the painting. But then the other thing that I missed that I kind of figured out this week that I was like, man, are you stupid? Like, I just feel so dumb all the time. It's like he starts the whole awakening from the meaning crisis stuff with this 9 dot problem. And the premise of the 9 dot problem, if you pay attention to it, is, okay, you've created a box for yourself, but with a little bit of training, you can learn to break out of that box and transcend the problem that you created for yourself. And I'm like, this is a total individualistic, self-transcendence. Yeah, there it is. The man above the fog, I think it's called.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
But his whole thesis is based on creation denial, because saying that the box, the constraints that you tried to do tried to solve the 9 dot problem with were yours and were in your head. And oh, by the way, there's a series of practices that you can engage in to get out of that box and free yourself from that constraint. Kind of like, I was like, wow, it was always right there. And I totally missed it. I got totally sucked in.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I was bringing up that poetry. First, hey, Sandy, don't let us. Do you want to say anything? You've been saying it.
No.
I appreciate.
If I said anything at all at this point is, what is Eric saying not to? And how did we jump from thanks.
Nice. Oh, the scrolling effect was perfect.
I had to ask because the next half of the question was, how did we jump from literature to demons just as I was signing in?
Not a reflection on your timing.
I'm about to bring it back to literature if you want, Sandy.
No, this is fine. Keep talking.
No, I really was, because Mark, I think Mark was listening when I brought this up, but then I went to this poetry thing with a friend of mine. It was like a poetry writing workshop thing, which is funny because they didn't write poetry, but they spent a lot of time talking. But basically, he was like trying to teach them how to like generate the kind of things that they would put in a poem. So they're writing, I guess it was called like a prose block or something. Any rate, but all that to say, it was fun. But he cast off this definition from Wordsworth about poetry as being like the spontaneous overflow of emotion, like made, like crystallized and like through tranquil reflection or something like that. And I was like, that is the most romantic definition of poetry I've ever heard. I was like, Dante and Virgil would have so much beef, I'm pretty sure, with this notion that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of emotion. It's like, there's definitely poetry that's like that, but like, tell that to the Divine Comedy. And I bring that up, right, Mark, because this notion of like, you've made this box, right? And now you need to transcend the box. And it's like, you don't have to live in a box. You can live in a cathedral. The cathedral's been built.
Well, and you can. Like, see, and that's where the problem comes. It's like you alone by yourself can. Yeah. And it's like, no, you actually can't. And the irony is you have to watch John Vervaeke to learn how. And it's like, then you can't do it by yourself. Why are you giving people this message? You're giving people the message. Therefore, they can't do it by themselves because they need the message. and that involves you, and like they just it's weird, and we don't
Well,
see it.
So,
So-
what is with the cathedral thing? I've heard that come up a few times.
Oh, I don't know what other people mean, but I mean, I meant two things. One is that the Divine Comedy is like a cathedral as a poem, right? Like, like literally, that there's actual correspondences between the structure of the poem and an actual Gothic cathedral, but then also in the sense that it's, let's say, highly structured and also deeply organic, and does all this stuff in terms of orienting you towards earth and heaven and towards the saints and the church and like informing you internally. So that's what I meant when I said.
With the big cathedrals, there's always going to be something that you haven't looked at yet.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And
Properly
it's
built church. It's got layers to it.
deeply fractal, right? So you've got
Right.
these big structures that then have a certain level of detail in that, but then that's made up of higher levels of detail. And that's very much like the Divine Comedy, where you've got, the line and then the particular terza, and then how that fits into the canto and how that fits into the whole thing all the way up and down and the geography of it. And what's cool is with the Divine Comedy, you get to the point where he's got enough basically like overlapping grids of meaning that all he has to do is pick up a little conversation with so-and-so at this one place in purgatory. And he said books. Just because it's that person, he had that one little basic conversation with them. But because they're right there and they're at that particular place in the poem, oh my goodness, it means all this stuff. So that
I do not write that kind of stuff.
Me neither. It's totally beyond me. I mean, for Dante, it was a work of decades, right? Like, in literally decades of his life. He spent most of his life preparing for it. At the last thing he wrote before he wrote the Divine Comedy, he said he's not going to write any more of Beatrice until he's actually figured out how to say something worthwhile. And I think it was 10 or 15 years before he wrote the Divine Comedy.
Wow.
And then even then, it was a labor of decades. And he wrote the last part of the Paradiso like within a year of dying, something like that. And the story is that no one could find it. And then he showed up in a dream to one of his sons and told him which of the bricks in the basement to pull out of the wall. And there were the remaining manuscripts of the Paradiso.
That's bonkers. I wanted to validate the comment that Corey made earlier about grabbing for power with psychology, right? The ways in which psychology is magic are numerous,
Yes.
right? Because they literally use words to manipulate people, right? And so it's magic words all the way down, and you see that a lot. So one of the things with the Barbie media, because it's not a movie or a film, that whole event is all about changing changing what's happening in the world by making propositional statements. It's all, except for one scene, which uses music and propositional statements. It's literally a song that changes the relationship between the mother and the daughter. But the rest of it, the sequences where things change as the result of speech, not as the result of actions in the world, which is just bonkers to me. It's just like, but it is, psychology is the same thing. It's that ethos of Wingardium Leviosa, right, or whatever. It's the Harry Potter way of the way, and that's a common theme throughout history. It's not unusual. Just psychology is like the most pure scientific form of magical words as the thing that moves.
C.S. Lewis predicted this in the Screw Tape Letters.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about coming up with a generation of materialist warlocks, basically.
Yes.
Who were just interfacing with forces in the universe, impersonal forces that they thought they were in control of. And basically using magic.
That is so true. Yeah.
So you guys are talking about interesting things. Where does magic and whatever Mark talks about in terms of his egregores and all the spiritual stuff, we've almost talked about that a few times. In
egregores are just the word for spirit when you don't want to use a religious word.
I kind of figured that. But so you've got magic, you've got egregores, you've got language itself.
Yeah, well, so magic.
I have a reason for my question. So
yeah, magic. Yeah, but
so I had a very weird dream last night. It was very hard. I don't remember the dream, and sometimes I don't. But it seems to be the distance the distance I go, because I have repetitive dreams. And then today at work, I had an unexpected conversation, but those happened to me with somebody who basically I just kind of, yeah. He was this guy walking around the store. He's into gems and rocks, and he was talking about this wish rock he has. And so I'm kind of going, and when I looked him up, there is something to the conversations you have, the timing of conversations you have, the people you engage with, and what they're doing. And you were talking about corporations when you first started that, but you also one of you guys just said something recently about people who think they can control people. And this person definitely thinks that. What is the intermeshing? Like, I'd love to hear you guys talk about that. I mean, you're already talking about them, but I want to drop the question and go, so I know what I think some of the stuff going on is with that. But what do you guys think some of the stuff going on with that is?
So it makes me think of the second chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, where it talks about where it and if it makes you feel any better, St. Paul probably didn't actually write this himself. He was just writing down a hymn that was already common in the early Christian churches.
I'm pretty sure I've read most of Paul.
He said, Philippians chapter 2, though he was in the form of God, Jesus did not deem equality with God something to be grasped at. Right, it's a very interesting word that Paul uses there. The word is harpagmos.
Okay.
What that means is grabbing onto something, and it's got this sense of like gripping it and squeezing it and kind of tearing it a little bit.
Like the harpy. Is that where the name harpy comes from?
Perhaps, but I know for a fact it's etymologically related to a harpoon.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Right. So
how do you spell
the
this word?
harpoon into the whale and it destroys the whale, but you've got a hold of it now.
Harpagmos.
But you've kind of got it with the harpoon has barbs.
Yeah, the
so
harpoon.
when we talk about Christ and consider equality with God as something to be grasped, that's the word there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
the harpoon is just designed so that you can wear the whale out. It's actually not supposed to kill them. What kills them is they run.
But okay, yeah,
But
it doesn't have the integrity of the whale in mind when you're grabbing onto it.
Right.
No.
You're piercing its flesh. You're putting barbs in there, so
and then holding on.
Things.
Right.
Yeah, and holding on.
That's magic.
So, yeah,
that's magic.
That's magic right there. It's also technology.
So
this sort of relationship to the world is unavoidable, right? If you're going to make a pot of spaghetti, you have to hold on to it such that you know that the water and the noodles and the heat all goes in, and that your shoe and the bugs don't go in, right? You have to control it. You got to be able to grasp these things. So then this is the trouble, I think, is that we have to know what we can lord over and know what we have to relate with reverence towards.
Yeah,
you get into magic when you start trying to control something that's worthy of reverence.
Yes, and I think so. I want to push back a little bit on just some technical stuff that Mark said earlier. I agree with what Father Eric said, because I would relate that to McGilchrist's thing. So like the grasping is the left brain stuff, and like the stuff that you're supposed to be reverent towards is the right brain stuff. And so psychology, in the way that it's magical by nature, it's not just propositional. It's Margaret and I, my wife, who is still not in labor yet, but anytime, might be tomorrow. I didn't think I was going to be here tonight. So it's kind of like we're everybody's using this word liturgy, especially the ortho bros, and like I've been reading Fagerberg and the Ethics of Beauty.
Wait,
Yeah,
did
I'm
you find
just getting
Fagerberg-
into him.
Did I bring up Fagerberg to you, or did you find him independently?
Probably you. I know somebody recommended it. It was probably you.
He's awesome.
I need to keep track of who recommends me what.
I
But
don't
so
care.
I
love it.
we're using this word liturgy to describe these just ways of being in the world, right? They're habit patterns. They're just they're patterns of being. So you can describe liturgy as, and like there's liturgies that lead you in a bad direction, and there's also liturgies that lead you in the only good direction, right? And what psychology does is it's starting to understand that you can create liturgies that have actual power, but that lead you in a dark direction. But we also like, is liturgy, isn't this supposed to be like a, is it a neutral word? Is it supposed to be like, do you have to call it a dark liturgy if it's not divine liturgy? I don't know. But that's the way that I've started to think about, that's how this magical stuff works in the world, is you discover what liturgies lead to what kinds of outcomes. And that can be a dangerous thing if you use it to grasp at power in an improper way.
Or right, yeah. If you're like,
or grasp the power at all ever.
Mark, I mean that is interesting though, right? Because there's the notion of hierarchy, right? Because in our family, right? So in my when I say I'm in my nuclear family, right, in which I'm one of the parents, there is a proper grasping of power or wielding of power. I don't know if I'm grasping it. I don't know if you mean that, but I'm wielding power and authority. And our house would, our children would actually die if I didn't, to be honest. Like they'd kill themselves quite quickly if I didn't wield that power over them. So I don't know what you mean there. I just want to throw that out. This is sort of what Father Eric is saying.
I don't think you're grasping at it for several reasons. One of them is you didn't spawn these children by yourself. They're not an act of will. You did not carve them out of marble, unless you don't actually have children and you just have statues.
They're not made.
You were cooperating first with a woman who I'm presuming is your wife, and you're also cooperating with creation, with God in the production of these children. It's like we can set the conditions for having children if we're doing things properly, but we can't actually make it happen.
Right.
All of that is a mystery. So in a certain sense, the power that you have has been bestowed upon you. You have not grasped at it.
Well,
you can use it as that's the proper understanding of how we are supposed to use authority, because authority is always something that's given to you. If if you use the grasping in the negative sense, that's like the grasping for the tree of knowledge of good and evil before God tells you it's okay to do so, right?
Before you're ready. Right. Before you're ready. And I want to bring this back to what Sandy asked, because we're sort of circumambulating it, right? Magic is what makes the world happen. Right? Everything else springs from that. Where we get confused is the definitions of things like power. I have a video on that, of course, right? And the differentiation of control and influence. We don't have power in the way that people talk about power. We have time, energy, and attention. That's the closest thing, right? And where we put that matters, because it has influence on the world. But what it doesn't have is control. What we never have is control, right? Which is not to say we never have any control over anything, but just, and like Peterson's so good with this, right? Like, just tell yourself to go to the gym. Go ahead, see what, right? And it may not be the gym for you, but it may be the forbidden donut for Homer Simpson, right? Or any sweet thing ever for me and my house. Like if I buy it, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. And in the past, I had much more self-control over sweet things, where I could buy a bag of M&Ms and it would be fine because it would last me 2 weeks. And that ain't happening anymore. In fact, I had to tell my friend last time too, we go on these drives occasionally. I was like, you have to buy very small bags of peanut M&Ms and you have to eat some of them, because this is a problem now. I know 5 years ago wasn't a big deal, but like my self-control is not what it used to be. Right. And so we don't have those levels of control that we use when we're talking about control. But what we do have, and what we're not paying attention to, and the thing that's ruining the world, is influence. When somebody does something bad and there are no consequences, that has an influence on you. it has a negative influence on you. Oh, that bad person isn't getting punished for doing a bad thing. But it also has a positive influence on you because you say, oh, people can do bad things and there are no consequences, huh?
Yeah, the psalmists were writing about that. Okay, I want to. There's three words. I want to just throw something out there. There's three words that have showed up at different times in this conversation: magic, religion, and liturgy. Well, religion hasn't, but it's just a great parallel, right? Because there's like, say, religion in the sense of the Catholic definition of religion as the virtue of justice oriented towards God, right? So it's those acts towards God which we owe to Him. So that'd be something much more like the traditional view of religion. Like, I went to mass this morning in a church, right? There's holy water, there's a priest, like that kind of religion. But then there's sort of like the Petersonian definition of religion, which is how you act towards the thing that's like you value most highly, regardless of if you're aware of it. So it's interesting that there's those two kinds of, because Corey, when you're bringing up, of religion, when you're bringing up liturgy, and you're like, people talk about there's liturgy everywhere, but really they're habit patterns. Right, taking Dr. Fagerberg, I can hear Dr. Fagerberg talking about his definition of liturgy when you say that. And so there's like, I think you could do the same thing with liturgy. One is there's a definition of liturgy like, I went to a Byzantine Catholic liturgy yesterday, and it was wonderful, right? And so we're participating in the divine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. So that's sort of like the way the if you will, like the habit patterns passed down through the holy tradition acted out towards God. But you can see how that word is still actually appropriate to understand as a similar category of human action as the liturgy of, of a family meal, the liturgy of alcoholism, whatever. It's these patterns that are passed down over and over and over and repeat themselves and then do something to you. So
they're always oriented towards something, right? To me, that's the main distinguishing thing is everything you said is true, but with the also additional that liturgy is always oriented towards something.
Okay, I'd have to. I mean, I think all actions are oriented towards something. I mean, that's what St. Thomas says. All actions have some final.
Well, they have to, right? It's discernment, judgment, action, and it's in that order.
So thank you for your patience. I'm going to get to magic because magic is actually a really, really complicated word. And so when we're talking about magic, Sandy, here, what we're talking about primarily is, let's say, the use of non-material causality to affect desired change in the world. So that's the kind of magic we're talking about here. That means like it might be special words that do something. It might be drawing a circle and summoning a demon, right? It might be arranging crystals in a certain pattern. Those aren't, you want to get someone out of the room. There's material ways to do that. Punching them in the face, spraying skunk smells, lighting the room on fire. Those are all material ways of getting someone out of the room. But you might try some magical incantation, like, I don't know, the list of every old name that you can find in every holy scripture ever, or, giving them the evil eye. Is that old Jonathan Pageau? Like that was like the first Pageau video I watched was his thing on the evil eye.
On the evil eye, yeah.
You're working through, the difference is that you're working through now through non-material causality. Now, given that, there are all sorts of other things that the word magic means. One way I would point you is towards Tolkien's excellent essay on fairy stories and our considerably less excellent conversation that I had with Emma about that on our channel. Because magic, one of the things that Tolkien says is magic, talking about magic, he says that language, story, and mind are inextricably interlinked in the human race and connects language with enchantment, right? Now, he brings the point though,
language, story, and mind are interconnected.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that language enchants, but not all enchantments are bad. He makes that very clear. Not all enchantments are bad.
Right.
And so his understanding of, say, a fairy story is that a fairy story is good magic. It is actually something like good magic because it enchants you towards goodness.
Right. Well, and that's the struggle is everybody wants a process like liturgy to resolve good and evil, or they want a thing like, this scientific finding is going to resolve good and evil. That's not how it works. The pursuit of good and evil is a separate pursuit from those things. It might be wrapped up in wisdom, right? But that's separate. Like enchantment is neither good nor evil, right? the chair is neither good nor evil. Could go either way though. Like it's not right. It's not exclusive. It's not. It's conditional on the usage.
Yeah.
So I think the important piece of that too is to, like, we're talking about these words, and there's a lot of overlap. Like, I'm still not even sure how I would distinguish between, like, the way you describe magic and religion and liturgy. Like, I don't know. It's difficult for me to distinguish between those things. But the key piece, I think, for us to understand, or at least for me, I'll speak for myself, is that to avoid improper usage of these things, you spend less time reflecting on those things in and of themselves and just reflect on obedience, or not reflect on obedience. You obey. You obey based on the authority that's given to you, because you end up acting these things out by enacting the proper authority that you've been given in the world, right? And it's
you end
not
up
as
acting
important.
things
You don't
out.
need to understand what's happening in order to participate properly in them.
You will act things out that you do not understand. And then the question is, are you going to act things out because an authority told you and at least relieve yourself of some of the responsibility? Or are you just going to end up creating more chaos in the world?
No. Acting on behalf of authority does not take away your responsibility in doing so. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
No, I'm not saying it takes away your responsibility. I'm saying it takes some of the responsibility away, which is a different statement.
What was your contrast?
Precisely.
I liked Corey's answer, but what was your contrast? Are you going to act something out just because you act it out, or are you going to act it out?
Are you going to act it out due to an authority?
Yeah, it's like,
you're going to take actions in the world. The question is, are you trying to take them alone? Because if you're trying to do that, you're going to get possessed by something. And the odds that something is good are less than if it's bad. And that's where the problem comes in. You're just more likely to stray towards certain negative patterns like addiction, negative patterns that you
tend to think very in the tangible world in a lot of ways. When you ask the question, my mind immediately goes to, I dream a lot of stuff. And sometimes I dream so heavily things that I'm engaging that I wake up exhausted. But
that's not helpful.
Not helpful? Well, it depends on what the question
Sleep doesn't work very well that way, I guess.
No, it doesn't.
Because I mean, I've stayed in hotels with friends who tell me I pray in my sleep. And sometimes I sign in my sleep,
That's beautiful.
I had a friend actually literally got up off the bed, took every single blanket because she said I was burning up. It was so hot in the bed there. There was 3 of us sharing a room, and slept on the floor and said, I didn't think you'd care. And I'm like, and then she got up and told me part of my dream. Just based off of a few clues. And I was like, and something she had seen. So when you start talking magic, spirituality and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah.
But part of magic is that synchronicity that happens. Like, for example, the weird coincidence, if you want to call it a coincidence, that after I pick a topic for the live stream, that topic just appears everywhere. And you can say, oh, that's, you're noticing it because, the white.
That's a thing.
No, that's definitely, like, I can tell you, we can measure these things quite accurately.
Absolutely. That happens all the time.
There's weird stuff going on. And it comes from places. And like I said, there's a bunch of places converging on, we'll say, the stuff that we like to talk about the most, right? Which is these topics. There's places you wouldn't understand or wouldn't believe are actually converging on these issues, because everybody's trying to resolve the good and evil issue. And some are further along than others in realizing that's what they're talking about. So they're just working through whatever system they're stuck in. But they're working towards the same thing. And for me, who sees it quite clearly, I'm just like, oh, you guys are in for a ride, And I usually know how far along they are too. And
I know what that reminds me of.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch.
Sandy, I just want to say that I aspire to have prayer so ingrained in me that I pray in my sleep.
Careful.
That's a beautiful.
Careful. The W word I was avoiding earlier today while holding an egg-shaped stone. That I was.
Careful what you wish for. Yeah.
I was looking at this thing going, I don't want to wish on it. I want to see what's in there, who's wished what on it. You know,
I mean, more
there's
than
all
that,
kinds of stuff in there.
well, first of all, there's a tremendous difference between wishing and prayer. And I think like that's actually related to magic. And
Yes.
there's one of the things that's really interesting in the Old Testament is the frequency with which you see these things where people ask for stuff from God and he gives them exactly what they asked for. And that's their judgment, right? I mean, and this is Dante's notion of hell. You get exactly what you asked for. That's hell. So if you don't ask for God, if you ask for, and the way Pageau would say it is, if you ask for something lower than God, it's always hell. It doesn't matter how good the thing you ask for is. It's always hell. And so this is, you know, there's the two fundamental prayers that I see in the Bible. There's Our Lady's response to the Archangel Gabriel, right? She says, "Be it done unto me according to thy word." Right? And then fiat voluntas tua, like be your will be done. And then you have our Lord in the garden where he says, "Not my will, but yours be done." Like every prayer ultimately needs to be converging towards that, not because you'll go to hell if you don't. I don't know how else to put it. And like that's why there's an entire class of fairy tales of people getting exactly what they wish for, right? They're not good fairy tales. Like they're not fun stories. It's like, right, I want everything that I touch to be gold. Great, there goes your daughter. It's like, but gold is great. What's better than gold? It's like your daughter's better than gold. It's like, but you don't know that. And right, and so then you think about the Lord's Prayer, right? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then we ask for our daily bread, what we need, and also the blessed sacrament of the Eucharist. Then everything else is just about like getting lined up with God. Like, let me forgive people, let me be forgiven, and keep me out of evil, out of temptation. You're not asking for anything except what God knows you need. There's this great. So one of the fairy tales in the Howard.
You like this prayer, Ted?
Yes, I love this prayer. It's the prayer that we're supposed to pray. It's when people on this earth ask God, "How should we pray?" He said, "Here's how you should pray." So like, but this fairy tale that I read my kids a while back in the Howard Pyle Wonder Clock book, which is 24 fairy tales, and most of them are wonderful. But these boys, it's one of the three sons go off to find something, and the older sons, basically are scumbags, and so things turn out badly for them. But they're going along, and the first night they see two taverns, and one tavern it says, "What you want, and don't pay anything for it." It's this beautiful 3-story building with music, and there's lights, and they can hear people laughing, and the clinking of dishes. They look over on the other side, and there's this little rundown shack, and it says, "What you need, and pay what you can." And so, of course, the two older brothers go, "Well, what I want and don't pay anything for it, heck yes." And so they go in there. And the younger brother's like, "What I need and pay what I can. Of course, I'm going to do that." So he goes over there and, slaves, earns his keep in this little hovel, and then ends up being given something that looks totally worthless. And turns out, of course, it's his magical deliverance at the last moment. He has no idea. And he ends up with the golden kingdom and the princess. It's like,
right.
Yeah. Pray, don't wish.
It sounded like you just described the brothers Karamazov right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of patterns. Yeah.
It's a lot of patterns. Yeah. I don't think Howard probably knew what he was doing.
Pinocchio.
What'd you say, Father?
I was thinking about Pinocchio. Pleasure Island.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's no free lunch. You sign up for that vacation, you're going to get sold a timeshare. That's all there is to it.
Wait, what's wrong with times? I have a time.
Okay, I'm so sorry, guys. Can I interrupt with this? This is one of my
It's
favorite
not free,
stories.
Mark. All I'm saying is it's just not free.
Not free. True.
One of my favorite stories is right after my wife and I were married. We did this. This is the first year we married. We did this big trip up, and we went and saw some people that we knew in the north, going up northeast. And so we're going through Virginia, and this old friend of mine from high school is living in DC. So we saw the Capitol with him, and then we're sitting in this pizza restaurant on the second floor where we're going to have dinner together. It's 15 tables, one or two other tables have people at them, so we can hear everything. And there's this dad and his 10-year-old son, And it's one of those things where you can see like they haven't spent that much time with each other because like the dad's sort of paying attention and the kid's totally not paying attention and just like, and so I'm getting these like little bits of the conversation. Mostly I'm talking with my wife, but I'm getting these little bits of the conversation. And so this, and this. And then all of a sudden I hear the dad go, son, I want to start this conversation by telling you that I love your uncle and I think he's a wonderful man, but he's gotten himself into a really bad situation. I was like, what happened? Like, did he commit treason? Did he kill someone? Like, did he embezzle a whole bunch of money? And so I'm like trying to not like scoot my chair over to him. And then I hear the son go a little while later. He's like, Dad, what's a timeshare?
Nice.
Anyway, there's my time.
A timeshare could get you in a lot of trouble if you don't talk with the people who have a right to know about it and spend a whole bunch of money that you don't have and sour that relationship. And you can see where the rest of that goes. So,
son, I wanted to let you know, I want to start this conversation by letting you know I love your uncle and I think he's a great man, but he's gotten himself into a really bad situation. Oh, man. Anyway, I totally derailed everything, but there you go.
Not at all. Not at all. It was in the spirit. That's what matters.
Yeah.
And that, the best way to understand magic is to say the non-material cause, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that
and
was great.
You are
That was
always, you're always doing something, right? You're always taking an action. And that was preceded by a judgment, whether you realize it or not. If you deny that, you're going to destroy your ability to discern. And then you're going to end up being a conservative Republican who goes to church, maybe even Catholic church, and not understanding or having the ability to say drag queen story hour is bad.
So that's based on what you two just said. That I love that people are starting to describe, one of the central things that we need as a resacralization of our imagination, right? Or redemption of our imagination. Guess what the reading today was from Romans in math, my favorite chapter from Romans 12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Like that's that kind of accomplishes all the stuff that you were talking about before, Ted, right? Like the end of prayer is having your will match God's will. It's not that your will disappears. It's that you willingly allow it to be transformed to participate in what God's will is. You don't lose yourself, but you obey. Yeah. It's back to like just obedience, and then beautiful stuff happens. You don't have to understand how it happens. And in fact, it's probably better if you don't understand how it happens. But some of us are cursed to want to know really bad.
Corey, let me ask you a question. What would you call the training of that of your mind? Because there's one word that actually describes this that's that you've heard around, interestingly. Well, how do children do it?
Well, I mean, there's
play.
What kind of language?
It's play.
That's
Peterson
what the psychologist would
play.
say. You're using psychologist language, Mark.
Well, maybe.
It's also liturgy.
This is true.
Play, okay, so let me. This is a soapbox. This is a soapbox thing for me. All right, so play is right. There is the way the psychologists describe it. Yes, play is the way that you figure it out, but it is not purely emergent. This is the part that's so
not emergent
helpful.
At all. Right.
It looks like it is when people talk about play.
It looks like it's emergent.
You're bumping into things, right? So like you're participating, you're trying things, and you bump into limits.
When you view it from the outside, when you view things from the outside, because you are outside of them, it looks emergent. It's just like discernment, judgment, action. I know that I have a discernment, make a judgment, and then take an action. You don't have access to those first two pieces. You have to infer them after the fact. So, and I went over this in my live stream. So it looks backwards to everybody outside of me, but it actually happens in the opposite order from what you see.
Look,
but my point is just that it happens in a structure.
Emergent versus what Mark said means
emanation.
So
emergence versus emanation.
Which is like
emergence
from above, bottom up. Look, I mean, the answer to this is actually Calvin Ball, because Calvin Ball, when you read a comic strip about Calvin Ball, it looks really fun. And then you go and you try to play Calvin Ball. Not only is Calvin Ball not fun, but you don't have the capacity to come up with rules quickly enough to play Calvin Ball. You can't play by definition is having a shared set of rules, right? Like, I mean, that's the word. Like, cheating comes from not having a shared set of rules, and so I think Mark and Corey are agreeing on this, right?
I
Not
think
necessarily. Why would
So-
play be a shared set of rules? Like, I mean, are you thinking play in the sense of sports, or are you thinking play the way little kids play?
The reason
No,
that play
kids-
works is
kids have
because
to
you
have shared
interact
rules.
with stuff. You interact in the structure that you're in. So it's like it could be a cultural structure, it could be a family, it could be like a baseball diamond where there's a set of rules that you're having to abide by. You can try to break the rules and then you run into consequences. And so like that's the way in which play works. But that structure of rules, if you, whatever you want to call it, whether the best way I think to understand it is really in context of a family or a culture, or perhaps a church, or perhaps an entire created reality that was created by one individual God who has rules in reality. So when you,
Corey, and use the word psychologist alongside play, two things pop into my head. One was more recent, which was my trauma counselor telling me that my homework for the year would be figure out who I am, what I love, play big, break all the stupid rules. And way further back than that was one of the guys that I really liked talking about autism at one of the symposiums. He and a few people that worked with him, what was his name? Dr. Stanley Greenspan, I think it is, out of Washington area at the time, if you go back a few decades. He had a program for families with children with autism that he called floor time or something. Anyway, his instruction to parents was, you come in and I will teach you how to be playfully obstructive so that you will create just enough friction on sort of where the kid's stuck. And he said, and the goal is get as close to a tantrum as you can without actually going there. And that's the two places, play to get there and get as close to that spot as you can. So he had videos of dad sitting on the floor playing with his son with little cars, and he'd accidentally on purpose get his hand in the way. But but it goes back to what Mark was saying about language, and language in a sense being the magic that you guys are talking about, because you're taking it and you're going this way and this way. You're needing the language, so it would be, are you this or this or this or this? And he kept saying, change up the order of things. So the one mom, they had a runner who was about 8 years old, and they're trying to talk to the doctor, and she's standing at the door, and he's going, don't get mad at him. What you want to do is, he said, sometimes let the door get partially open. And when it does, you say, but did you mean you wanted to go out or in? And then he'd say, and you say that for a few times, and then just to kind of confuse and also check what the rule is in the kid's brain, you go, but did you say you wanted to stay in or go out? And you flip it. When you guys start talking about that, those are the two places that my head goes.
Yeah, that's because when they're talking about play, and Vervaeke makes this because he's a stupid science guy. Serious play. It's like, no, there's no such designation. Play is the spirit of exploration in which you are learning. That's what it is. And so it's not about being within the rules. It's about being able to transgress the rules without having set consequences. It's not that there are no consequences, but when you're an adult and you break the rules, like you drive on the wrong side of the road, those consequences are kind of like one and done. And when you're a child, you're supposed to be able to break rules and kind of figure out very softly what consequences are all about, so that when you realize there are actual one-time consequences, that you don't get to there's no more consequences after this, right? You have a respect for them. And when you don't do that, look around at the world we're living in. That's exactly the hell we're living through.
In your language, Mark, it would be either forming of intent to form patterns or something of that nature, because one of the other videos he had wasn't with autism. It was a child with severe CP, about 1 year old, had only control of mouth muscles. The only thing that the child could do was grip things. And the mom was playing with one of those chew toys for teething, and doing the exact same thing, just close enough that the daughter has to reach for it, but not so far as that she can't reach for it. So the same principle is and I was thinking when you guys were talking, in a sense, play is about breaking the rules, but it is also about forming the rules. And so when I picture that mom and daughter, it's that place where you're kind of deciding the depth. It's
finding boundaries and appreciating the value of them, and understanding that different rules or different boundaries have different consequences and costs. And then you can make those trade-offs. Otherwise, you don't learn how to make trade-offs in life, and you don't learn how to avoid things that kill you. And so you end up doing dumb things like trying to fix the planet and just starving a bunch of people. It's like, don't do that. That's terrible.
You were going to go for something easy, like fix my own car engine.
No, because most people don't do that. Most people go one layer up. That's where they get into trouble. They go, oh, I know how to fix the climate. We'll just force everybody not to drive, because I don't drive anyway because I live in the city. And it's like, you're not really understanding how this works. And that's because they didn't have proper play when they were young. And that's one of the things we've taken out of the school system, by the way. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Did you know what they're doing here in Canada now? I was listening very, very, very carefully to CBC, because it's one of those sound the same things. They were talking about right to read program. They're putting this right to read program that they're putting it in, and I'm going, okay, I've been spending way too much time on Discord listening to people. Are they spelling it RIGHT or WRITE? What? And I'm going, please be a W, please. No. Right to read. So now they're going to, instead of doing anything practical that your basic EA would ask for kids with various reading disabilities, no, the government's going to mandate so many whatever dollars for one more, but this test will actually tell us something, early assessment. That's what they're going to do. You should have been there before. Apparently, it's going through the paperwork.
Can I just ask, Nick? Did we meet in Chino? Okay.
Sorry. Hi.
Yo,
Sorry.
You're muted, Nick. You're muted. Nope. That's even worse. Yeah.
Yeah, we went. I went to that mass.
It's St. Mary.
The rock that was my first rock concert mass.
Mine too.
Stadium rock concert mass. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Mark, I did the thing where I picked the closest church. We were all just going to go to the closest church, and there was drum set, guitars there, but the people were very friendly and welcoming. So.
They were.
Come on, that's not.
Does it bother you? It drives me nuts.
Oh, I didn't like it. I didn't like it.
Just seeing guitar like anywhere near the
well,
place it drives me nuts. It bothers me.
It was an oil and water experience, because Father Eric was, I'm a new Catholic convert, and I don't come from a Christian background, so you must forgive my layman's way of describing this kind of stuff. But when Father Eric is coming, the initial procession, yes, into the church, Father Eric is
instant gravity.
Yeah,
Father Eric.
Yeah, the power of Christ compels you, sort of, coming in, and it's and they Jesus Christ, it's like a YouTube. I mean, it was so if you were deaf, you're looking at the procession and you would totally have one experience, and then if you were blind, you would have a completely different experience.
Oh no!
And then myself being gifted with both eyes and ears, it was wow, I've never seen anything like this. And I was really, I must say, Ted, I was, honestly, I was very moved by you were kind of sitting a couple rows in front of me, and you know, you were very, I really appreciated how like focused and, you know, devout you were and everything.
Nick,
No
I-
idea, you know.
I have a
Just
story I have to
really
tell you.
Curious. I'm just
Another
curious about
story.
this
Let's do it.
experience. 1 second.
I,
On a scale, was this kind of like your average Protestant church that uses things, or was it more like this one Pentecostal one I went where me and another guy got up because it was going to throw his pacemaker off, but I was just kind of going like,
it was more the first one, Sandy. It was more the first one.
Now, was that from the music or from the magic?
Let's just say the entire building wasn't constructed to deal with the level and volume of sound and intensity.
Yeah, probably one of those churches that I've been outside of where it's like I can hear the music better outside of the church building than inside. No, okay, so Nick, here's my story. So last fall, I went on this 2-day walking pilgrimage over in eastern Oklahoma, which was wonderful, but I was not prepared for how much walking it was going to be. And so by the end of the first day, my legs were cramping up so badly that I either had to walk or sit. I could not stand. And I thought, it'll be great. I'll sleep it off and be fine the next day. There's only like 12 miles the next day. I didn't. It was just as bad the second day. So then it's like 1,500 people, and it ends up at this beautiful, like 30-year-old Romanesque, very traditional Byzantine monastery. It's a beautiful place. Our Lady of Clear Creek, if you ever get the chance in Oklahoma. But like, we're way past filling up this church. And so there's like hundreds and hundreds of people are out in the courtyard in front, and like we can just hear this pontifical high mass going on. Right, Father? It's a pontifical high mass if the bishop is there.
I mean, that's a Latin term, and you're at a Byzantine church, so I don't know how they do things. Benedictine, that's completely different. Yeah, pontifical high mass is correct.
So they're like, people are leaving because like they've got noisy kids and stuff, and that people would come out and be like, hey, we've got like 5 seats in the church. And so first couple of those went by, people weren't really getting up. I was like, I feel dead, but I'm gonna go in there. That'll be great. And so I went in, and I'm like stuck in some corner behind the monks chanting, and it's beautiful to hear, but I can't see anything at any rate. So then at the portions of the mass when we're supposed to be kneeling, my legs are done. So I just like I was like on my face because like literally my legs weren't working. So then I went up, and received communion and all this, and then we go out and we have this barbecue dinner out on the lawn in front of the monastery, and I limp back to my car, and this lady comes up to me and she's like, I just want you to know that like I've got 2 teenage sons, and they're feeling pretty awkward, and then they saw you at mass, and they're just like, when they saw your reverence in mass, it just really like affected them, and they're like, we could do this if this guy can do it. I was like,
wow,
yeah, that's
wow.
right.
No, and I gotta say, I mean, like,
I literally couldn't get off the floor. Like,
no, I really shouldn't stroke your ego like this, and you're probably gonna have to go to confession next Sunday. But I totally know what they mean, because, like, I don't know. Maybe you're the best LARPer I've just ever seen in my life. But man, you look like it's inspiring. It's inspiring.
You should come to my home parish when I've got all 4 kids. It's
gosh, that would have been like an opportunity for you to just participate in mass without having to worry about a fight breaking out.
Yeah.
Okay, there's something there.
Yeah. It's like we had some fidgety kids today. I'll put it that way. It was like, oh, this child's trying to eat paint falling off of this chair, and like, please don't steal that child's toy. And like, we're going in like the room behind the narthex. It's like, yeah. So, when I get a weekday mass in, it's a good day.
So I was Mark was talking about Vervaeke earlier, and play, or he was ragging on Vervaeke earlier and talking about play. And is Catholicism play? And I was actually thinking about this like months ago.
Good question. Father, what do you think about that? Is liturgy like appropriately described as a form of play? What do you think?
That's what Romano Guardini, the great liturgist, said that liturgy was supposed to be play.
I would say
in that
play.
What?
I would say it's a play. But the type of play that Peterson and Vervaeke and those guys are talking about is exploratory.
Yeah.
So it's a different
when a human
aspect
being
of the playing
encounters
word.
the mass, are they not exploring within themselves, within the bounds of what the mass is affording them?
I don't know what the hell they're doing at Mass, dude. I don't go there.
I mean, you
No,
know, it's pretty good.
I actually I don't mean the mass. I mean the Catholic reality itself. So, for example, like confession would be like going like touching base, or what are these like tag games where you're like safe or something like. I think, you know, I was watching some Vervaeke video probably around the time of the Chino conference or something, and he was talking about play and I don't know. It just seems like he was talking about Catholicism to me, but I've never really understood Vervaeke, so maybe I'm like wildly off base with him and Catholicism.
This is the joke where Vervaeke's like, you know, it'd be really great if there's this place where people could come together on a regular basis, and they had these practices of like cultivating wisdom, and like maybe they could sing together or something. And it's like, it's called church. And Paul says that Paul Vanderklay says that every time he gets the chance. He's like, oh, you just invented church. Good job. But
no, he's reinventing the religion that's not a religion, because he deconstructed Christianity, took all the pieces apart, and then said, oh, now we need to put all these pieces back together. It's like, or not take them apart. That would be better.
So, Nick, what you're pointing at, there's actually a really great like thing to think about. I've hit this in other areas, right? So you're making this connection between, and I don't know what kind of a connection it is. It's sort of like a formal connection or a poetic connection between, say, playing tag and confession, right? That's like you're going back to be like, you go out and then like, you're coming back and you're now you're safe, right? And there's, and I think another good way to look at that is, well, I was bringing up those fairy tales, right? Where you have these stories of these princes who then they go and they inherit this kingdom of gold and the princess, and right. And you could look at those two things, and I think the world's there's been a whole trend of saying, oh, well, we figured out what religion is. It's these childhood games just like taken up to an adult level. You could say that. You could equally say that all these childhood games are foreshadowing this reality we're supposed to participate in. And like, there's this move all the time of, oh, well, we figured out what the story means because, like, you know, say it, what was it? The Three Little Pigs. So I read this totally whack and also awesome description of it as being like learning how to control your bowel movements. Children learning how to control their bowel movements. It's like, I'm going to huff and I'm going to puff and I'm going to blow the house down. It's like, yeah, you better figure out how to keep the wolf out or in, or however you want to say it. It's like, is that all that the Three Little Pigs is? Can you lower it to this like sort of analogy of potty training? And it's like, I think that if you make that move too often, it'll kill you intellectually, because the truth is that potty training is actually a fate adumbration of something higher, right? It's that rational capacity to order your body appropriately so that you can live in harmony and beauty with people. And so all that to say, like, yeah, I think you could definitely see these relationships between play and aspects of the liturgy or the sacraments, but that there's nothing intrinsic about that lowering the higher things. And that's the problem. Most of the time when people are like, hey, look, there's this connection between religion and play, they're trying to say religion is just play. It's like, how is that helpful? Honestly, right? Like, now you've taken the most meaningful thing in human life and lowered it to something that's not that meaningful. Instead, let's do it the other way around, where we're saying, maybe I can see the beginnings of these things in childhood play. And I think that actually puts you in a position to have a much richer view of the world.
Right. Well, and if you haven't done it, if you haven't done and this is my argument all along, right? Like, if you don't have the exposure to learning control, learning boundaries, learning consequences, and you grow older, but you haven't learned what a 4-year-old has learned. I mean this technically. I'm not being hyperbolic. Then look around. We have seemingly people in their 20s and 30s literally actually leaving the confines of where they're at, their apartments in the city, going to a random spot with lots of people and screaming. This is not the behavior of somebody who's had a proper introduction to play as a child, technically, like, for real. right?
What
This
are they
is not an
screaming about?
isolated incident. This is not one or two people, right? And it manifests differently in different folks, right? Like I'm having discussions with people where they're saying, well, you're doing the thing to me that you said I was doing to you, and therefore you're the problem. And I'm like, well, first of all, that didn't even happen. And second of all, that's not how things work. Like, what? Are you 4 years old? Because you sound like you're 4 years old, but they are. They are. They haven't mentally matured past that point because they've never had play. It's not a coincidence that Peterson's saying we need play. It's not a coincidence that Vervaeke's saying we need serious play. It's not. He doesn't want to dirty himself with actual child's play because that would imply that you're a child. But actually,
and if
no,
you're a child,
are.
you can enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. Well, look, there's all sorts of interesting things there, and like, so we've got 4 children, and I was one of 5, but my wife was an only child. There's all over horizontally and vertically were all these interesting mixes of large families, sometimes huge families, and single children. And so I see a lot of this contrast. And, my wife has noted, like we've noted, there's such a difference in terms of, now I've got a bunch of siblings that are, and this is assuming they're about your age. When you grow up in that, you don't just get to get people's attention, right? It's like, you better be saying something good, basically. If you want everyone's attention at the dinner table, it better be worthwhile, right? And you better be able to say it concisely. Otherwise, everyone's just going to shut you down or talk over you, right? And so there's these interesting things that come out of, I'm seeing, right? Like our oldest is not that old. And I'm already seeing these sorts of things where it's like, they're learning that like, you don't just get to like dominate everyone's attention. You don't get to dominate everyone's attention all the time forever. And like there's this give and take in conversations and all of these things that, right, Mark is saying should be worked out at, start getting worked out when you're 4, maybe. That'd be a good time to start.
4's a good time to start. Should be in progress by 6.
Yeah, exactly. So it's weird. And then you even see that, Sandy, to go back to your point earlier about this emergence of play. I mean, I was thinking about this with my kids. Like, they get so mad at each other when their siblings not playing by the same rules, right? No, they may have just made them up on the spot. That's fine. But like, they sure better abide by the rule of, these are my magnetic tiles, or it's my turn to have the baby, or this is my side of the pretend table, or we're having a dinner together and not, like this happens all the time with my, less now, but my 2 older girls would build these magnet towers and then their younger brother would just smash them. It's like, that's not the game for them. And they'd be so mad. It's like, the game is you finish the tower and then you look at it and then you smash it. That's the game. Yeah. That's what they're playing. But he'd just come in and just, and it'd all be on the floor. And so there's this really interesting thing of like, you do have to abide by the rules. Now, they may be crazy rules and they might change, but there's this sort of, you have to have that level of mutual agreement there.
Well, but that's what you learn. You learn good rules from bad rules. You learn consequences and trade-offs. That's how you learn it. Arbitrary games, arbitrary liturgies, arbitrary engagements. And when you don't do that, you do crazy things like, what difference does it make about gender? Like, what could that, we use pronouns all the time. There was somebody who made an argument. I saw it on Twitter today. They made the argument that this pronouns thing is stupid. Pronouns have been in video games for years. Like, that was some kind of an argument? I was like, pronouns have been part of the language forever. What is your point exactly that pronouns exist? Because we already knew that. That doesn't talk about how you are supposed to use them, though. So, like that was his argument. He thought he was making a rational, reasonable argument. And I'm like, you don't even make any sense, dude. Like, you don't understand what you're saying even a little bit because you haven't played with rules. You haven't understood the importance that some rules should be bent. Some rules should never be broken, right? And that's important that is important to learn. And you can't learn that if you're in a world where it's either, soft slope or hard slope. That doesn't teach you that middle ground.
Now, Nick, I've been thinking about the question you asked about whether we could talk about Catholicism as play. And I'm willing to actually accept that if the idea is that when we come into the kingdom of God, we finally become grown-ups then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's what that means, then I'll buy that. Because otherwise, if Catholicism can actually tell you how to live your life, like it's got kind of a universal extension to everything you do. It can be informed by it, right? So then at that point, everything would be play, and that's like saying, everything is real. True, not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, Father Eric, there are some people that do need to hear that, actually. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the probably the most important thing so far in my life that why I joined the church and everything that C.S. Lewis taught me, but I've heard from many other people who also C.S. Lewis probably taught, is the idea that God condescends. And I'd never really heard the word condescend used in that way before, and now it means everything to me, especially because I'm a father. I have one kid who's 15 years old, and so I'm just intimately aware of condescending to a child. And it's just, that was my light bulb moment for me, is that God doesn't sometimes, so he doesn't sometimes condescend. God condescends, period. That is what he is doing. And so that's probably sort of where I kind of see or I'm sympathetic to the idea of the Catholic reality as play. Father Barron, Bishop Barron, best video I've ever seen by him. It's not on YouTube. I scoured looking for it. It's not. I'm in the Word on Fire group, or what, I pay my dues for that. So, but when he was a priest, a father, he made this video about that, and I won't reenact it for you, but basically he just was talking about, I don't know if you've seen it, but he was talking about these bugs outside of his window that show up in Southern California in the winter. And the punchline of the video is he basically says, I am one of these bugs, not from God's perspective. He said from an angelic perspective, which is of course much lower than God. He said from the perspective of an angel, I'm just one of these bugs who crawls from the right side of the window all the way to the left side during the course of a winter in Southern California. And that is their accomplishment. And I'm like a writer, and Father Barron, I've published, 12 books and counting, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm one of these bugs. And and I was like, aha, yes, because God condescends, because we are children.
I mean that, Nick, one of the things about the Eucharist that is just that reminder over and over and over. So God would come to us in such a humble way. And there is, I mean, I've been reflecting on this a lot, that there's the thing in the liturgy, right? So that there's this back and forth of, right, we bring the bread and the wine and we offer them to God in the liturgy. And it's which is God gave them to us in the first place. We're all contingent being. This is all contingent being. The bread and the wine did not come from us.
We're buying our dad a Christmas gift with money he gave us.
Right.
But then what does he do? Right, exactly. So that that would be ironic enough, but then he doesn't receive it. He doesn't give it back to us to eat. He gives himself to us under those appearances. Okay, you're hey Dad, here's this $10 Christmas present that I gave you. It's here's this little piece of metal. He's great, I gave you a key that unlocks the deed to the entire universe. It's oh, okay. You're well, thank you. I would like to give it all back to you. And he says, that's great. Now eat me. And you're okay, I can't win, except that I'm winning. It's there's this yeah.
Wow.
Corey. Yeah. So
the question is, why do we think condescension is bad?
We shouldn't.
No, it isn't.
It's our
Right.
damn pride. Literally, it's our damnable pride that thinks condescension is bad.
Right. So I just want to tell the story because it's so good. It was a few months ago, actually. Somebody came on to the Discord server, onto my Discord server, and asked me a question. And they said, I want to know about this. Okay. Now think about what's wrapped up in that, right? Why would you ask anybody a question? Because you think they have knowledge that you do not have, that they have an answer or they can provide an answer that you don't have. Okay. You've already placed them above you in that thing. Maybe not on all things, hopefully not in all things, right? But in that thing, they have something that you don't have. They're above you in that aspect. And I was trying to work through, the nature of the actual question. Like, what is it that I need to tell this person? Because I never know what you people don't see in the world that I see so clearly that would never occur to me that everybody doesn't see this, right? And so I eventually got to that with him. And he said, listen, you're being very condescending. And I said, dude, how can I not be condescending? You came to me believing, whether you're right or not, that I had a piece of information or insight or whatever, wisdom that you didn't have. I'm trying to communicate it to you. In order to do that, I have to come down to your level. And he went, oh, you're right. And then he didn't feel so bad that I was, quote, condescending to him anymore. And it solved the problem. But I was like, yeah, why is this a bad thing? But we do, even me, I think it's bad too. I'm like, oh, he sounds so condescending. But there's something about that. It's just we're using the wrong word. And that's why I'm always big on precision with language. Precision with everything else is garbage. Precision with language is actually really important to me.
So, Mark, that just makes me think of St. Augustine saying that humility is the key to it's the gateway to all the other virtues.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And humility isn't about, my understanding is that it's not about it's not reviling yourself. It's just seeing yourself as you are. Humility is the capacity to see things as they are.
Right. Humility is a part of temperance.
Well,
Excellent.
and that's,
is it?
Humility is a part of temperance, whereby you do not take inordinate pleasure in your own excellence.
Yeah. Okay. But you also don't despise yourself, because that would be,
you have to take the appropriate amount of pleasure in your excellence, because God has given all of us, some manner of excellence, some manner of share in his own nature. And if you don't take pleasure in that, that's also vicious.
And so you can't, it's so hard to learn if you can't see, I don't know something that person knows. It's that capacity. That's amazing. When you can, but that's humility. It's humility. Right. And then they condescend. I love that, Mark. It's they condescend to your level to tell you, every professor should be condescending to their students appropriately.
Otherwise you won't learn from them, because they'll be talking above your head. And the key is not to, quote, trigger them and make them feel like you're condescending to them, or you sound condescending to them, but you also have to talk at their level, which means you have to find out what that level is. And that's rough on people. And the problem is, humility is the space that you create into which you can grow. Without that space, you can't grow and change. You're stuck in a closed world. You're stuck in a box of your own making, to be a little fair to Vervaeke's point. You've made a box for yourself, and there's no space for you to grow out of it. There's no way to self-transcend, right? There's no way to transcend at all. I'd argue you can't self-transcend, right?
What is that?
That's what humility is for. It's for making that space outside of yourself to grow into.
There's that name. What's the name for the political discourse window? I usually remember this, and I always forget.
Overton window.
Overton window. Mark, so this is exactly my point. And Nick, to your earlier discussion about reverence, this is one of the things that I love about the fraternity parish, the priestly fraternity of St. Peter parishes that I go to, where it's there's a really strong culture of reverence. And if you don't have that, say, compared to the Protestant churches that I grew up going to, where there's this we're going to meet you where you are. Right. And this is what's weird. This is the wrong kind of condescension, actually. It's really interesting. It's we're going to provide an environment where you don't feel any gap between your. Well, it's condescending so people don't feel condescended to. That's weird. I've never thought about it in that way. And so what happens when I go to this, go to mass, and it's wow, it's quiet enough in here that it's really uncomfortable when my kids start making noise and I have to leave. And like all the women have head coverings on, and like everyone genuflects when they come into the nave, and all this stuff. And it's like, what that does though, these things that are like natural to me, what that does is it gives me somewhere to go up towards, right? Because if I don't have that, and I don't have the humility to recognize that like I'm not naturally as reverent as the conditions that are being created here, then I can't grow in that. I'm maxed out. And what that actually does is it gives space for the entire rest of my life to move towards that, even when I'm not at mass. Now, all of a sudden, like our household can be more ordered, and I can, there's all of this, our family life and the way that I treat people and my capacity to be serious at the right times, right? All of these things, there's this sort of humility that like kind of like opens this, it's like it shifts the Overton window for you in terms of what you can be. What have you got, Father?
And it would be impossible for that to work if you were satisfied with yourself.
Yes, exactly.
If you were like, oh, yeah, this is all that there needs to be. I'm full. I'm done. I don't need to move anymore. No, it has to create that painful sense of, oh, this is bigger than me, and now I'm small.
Yeah,
that can hurt, but you gotta. That it hurts in the same way as being hungry hurts. Is that it's like, okay, now I've got motivation to go do something.
Yeah.
But is it motivation to make yourself bigger?
Yeah, but not bigger than you're supposed to be. It's like
just like being hungry.
Yeah, right. If you do it right, if you're hungry correct, then you just fill your stomach up. You don't fill yourself with an entire taco truck. Now we've got real physical limitations on doing that with food. Thanks be to God. But spiritually, it's much easier to fill yourself beyond what you should be taking in. Which is why it's always good to remember Psalm 131. Oh Lord, my heart is not proud, nor haughty my eyes. I've not gone after things that are too great, nor marvels beyond me. But truly I have set my soul in silence and peace. As a child has rested its mother's arms, even so my soul. And speaking of rest, I think we've got like 13 hours on the road tomorrow. So.
Whoa.
Wow.
Where are you going?
Las Vegas.
Vegas,
Okay.
baby.
This is part of your
You
movie.
said it wrong.
13
It's
hours.
Vegas, baby.
Wow.
Is this
So
part
anyway,
of
Driving
canon law?
all
I'm
the way back
moving-
down to my sister's cottage.
My dad and I are moving my brother-in-law to Fargo. So
Yeah. You said that at the beginning, but I'm like, that long? That much driving? Wow.
yeah, well, my sister loves him, so
Don't know why.
Yeah, it's a pretty big
We gotta
country,
put-
I guess.
yeah.
Magic.
Anyway.
Love magic.
Thanks,
May as
everyone. Appreciate you holding the breach with me till Father came. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Ted.
Ted, I had
Thanks
a
for
quick
doing
question
it.
for you, Ted.
Well, you're gonna have to ask that later because I'm ending the stream.
Oh, okay.
Nick, find me on Discord. You can find me on Discord probably.
Okay. I just want to get the name of the poet. I'll send you a DM.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Yeah.
Good night and God bless you all.
No.
Good night.
God bless.